For quite some years I lived and studied and worked in Rome, long before I came to Brisbane. And one of the most memorable experiences of my Roman years was attending the great masses in St. Peter's Square. Some of you would certainly have been there, where you have 100,000 people in the square, perhaps at Christmas or Easter or whenever. And they come from every country on earth, every skin colour, every language, every culture. It's magnificent. And yet for all the variety, there is an astonishing sense of unity. And not just unity, but a sense of family. I don't know how else to describe the bond that is there. And it's all the more extraordinary because there's such a huge crowd, and yet the bond feels almost intimate, like a family. So how is this possible, I ask? And I used to wonder this as I sat or stood in the square. What makes this possible? Part of the answer, of course, is the papacy, that mysterious gift of Jesus Christ to the Church and the world. And I can only say that in the years when I worked closely with the Pope, the Petrine ministry, the ministry of the successor of Peter, looked even more mysterious close up than it did from afar. There is something deeply mysterious and grace-filled about the ministry of the Pope that goes back to this extraordinary exchange of which we have just heard the story, where Jesus says to the apostles, "Who do you say I am?" And it's Peter, Simon Peter, who speaks up and says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus then goes on, as we have heard, to say, "You are Peter," his nickname. It means rock. "You are rock. And on this rock I will build my church." And he entrusts into the hands of the Galilean fishermen the keys of the kingdom, keys of which we have heard from the prophet Isaiah. If he should open, no one shall close. If he should close, no one shall open. Whatever you loose on earth shall be considered loosed in heaven. Whatever you bind on earth shall be considered bound in heaven. So into the hands of this man, flawed as he was, Jesus entrusts the keys of the kingdom. And there is the heart of the mystery. So in some sense it is the Pope, the successor of Peter, who makes it possible that you can have 100,000 people from everywhere on earth, but joined together with the intimacy of a family. But it can't be just the Pope. In fact, in all of this, it is the work of Jesus Christ. What draws everyone to St. Peter's Square is that in one way or another, in one language or another, from one culture or another, they all put their faith in Jesus Christ crucified and risen. And there is the true secret of this bond that dissolves all differences. And it's exactly the same in the cathedral here today. We come from so many different countries, cultures. We speak so many different languages. We look so different in the way we dress, the colour of our skin, our facial features. And yet there is this extraordinary sense of the bond. Whether you come from Asia or Africa or Latin America or Europe, it doesn't matter. Because we all put our faith in Jesus Christ, who's here and now. So it's not just the Pope, but beyond the successor of Peter, there is Jesus, and it's of him we say, should he open, no one closes. Should he close, no one shall open. He will become a throne of glory for his Father's house, and we enthrone Jesus, all of us, here today, in the great bond of faith. This bond that brings us together in the cathedral today is all the more extraordinary in a moment like this, where the world seems so pathetically fragmented, and when the voices of hatred and division and violence of every kind sound so loud around the world, seeming to drown out the voice of Christ, certainly the voice of the Church. But in the midst of all of that, here are we, flesh and blood as we are, who say today and show today that something more is possible, that there is something beyond the hatred. That's not the best we can do. There is something beyond the division. There is something beyond the violence. They're not the best we can do, even if at times we seem to drown in them. More is possible. And that's where, here today from this cathedral, a great hymn of hope rises in a world like that, so shadowed by hatred, division and violence. In such a world, the hymn that we sing today, in all our different tongues, but with one heart, is in fact a hymn of hope, grounded upon the fact that Jesus Christ destroys all the barriers and makes us one people. This is why the Church will always matter, because of the word of hope that Jesus Christ makes us and is making of us. And insofar as we become that word of hope in a fragmented world, then we become a sign of the depths of God, as St. Paul says. How rich are the depths of God. See, it's all God's work. What we do here today, it's all God's work. And seeing that, we say in the words of Paul, echoing the Apostle, how rich are the depths of God. How deep his wisdom. How deep his knowledge. How impossible to penetrate his motives or understand his methods as he shatters all the divisions and makes us one people. All that exists, particularly the bond of unity, that is the Church, all that exists come from him, all is by him and for him. To him then be glory forever. Amen.